Hey everyone, Joseph here. I go by Audi Snapper on the forums, and today's video is going to be a little bit different from my past couple of videos in that instead of just giving everyone an update, I'm going to show you the process by which I develop a part or a little component for the trophy truck from scratch. In this case, a 3D printed part. I know, although it's all about 3D printing for me these days, the process isn't unlike the steps I took to create the truck from scratch several years back, and I'll do my best to describe my process in this video, and hopefully you guys can learn something from my trials and tribulations and how I do things. Editor Joseph here. So yeah, some of you may have already noticed, but for those of you who haven't, this video is over an hour long. After filming the 4 separate steps it took to create one little 3D printed part, I realized there was no real way to edit the video down to be under 30 minutes, which isn't exactly a short video either. But instead of breaking the video into smaller segments like most people would, and the smart thing to do, I forged ahead and uploaded the full video for you guys. I'll include links in the description below so that you can jump ahead to one of the 4 different parts of the process, or you can use the time codes that I'm pointing to right here as a guide. I realized by adding this segment that my video is even longer than before, but figured that giving you the heads up was more important than the length of the overall video. I hope you guys understand. Today I'm creating a middle support for the rear bedside fenders. I have the one in the back, which hopefully you've seen in my last video. If not, I'll post the link in the comments section below. And I have the one, let's see, up front, which is, or more in the middle of the chassis, which mounts the cab to the cage. But because I had to trim the body to fit my truck, I cut out all these pieces here. I'll show you in the camera above. The little, intermediate mounting point got hacked off. There are 4 major, sort of steps in my process when creating a custom 3D part for the truck. The first step is to figure out exactly where the part needs to be located. So, where on this physical surface it needs to be located. I need to take some basic measurements of the physical truck, so that when I move on to step 2, which is creating the 3D piece in my modeling program, I can base the measurements of the new part on the physical truck, the actual truck that I measured, and not the one that I created in the computer, since they are slightly different. Once the part is fully modeled and I'm happy with the result, I can move on to step 3, which is to export the model from the modeling software and import it into the 3D printing software. I know it gets a little muddy, but stay with me here, where it create like the necessary little support pieces for the 3D part to be printed. That's something I'm sort of learning on the fly here, and I'll try to describe that on step 3. From there we head back downstairs to start step 4, the 3D printing process. But before any of that can happen, I need to remount some of the black plastic panels and the body so that I can measure exactly where that part needs to go. So one of the things I didn't talk about in the last video was that when I talked about how much longer the wheelbase was of the Baja Ray versus the Yeti Score truck, obviously I couldn't extend my wheelbase a full inch or whatever the difference was. So I ended up doing a 1/2 inch. And what that did is I ended up having to create 2 new holes, and you can sort of see the distance that I had to move it forward. So if it was a full inch wheelbase difference, instead of moving it a full inch forward, I only did about a 1/2 inch. So that means I had to lengthen my wheelbase by 1/2 inch back. So that's where I sort of landed. So you may or may not have noticed in my last video that I don't have a specific bracket down here. So what I ended up doing, I don't know what's the best camera to show you this, just this little piece which used to be part of this top bracket, I snapped it off and I'm just using it as sort of the nut behind this screw to keep the body panel sort of secure. I didn't think it really needed a physical mounting point against the black panels. It seems pretty solid. So, all right. So the body is mounted. Now we need to figure out exactly where this guy should be. And I'm thinking probably put a wheel on to make sure that I don't hit whatever it is that I'm going to be mounting up here. Let's see. Need to make sure that the sway bar clears whatever it is that I'm creating. This might actually be the right spot right here. It's out of the way of the sway bar. It can come off sort of at an angle, so it would do something like that. That's one option. The other option is to come straight out of here and go in that zone. Problem there is that I'm worried that whatever I make is going to end up hitting that. I think this is the right one. I think that's a good spot. Let's go with that. All right. So let's talk about measurements. It's not going to be super critical because there's no specific hole that I have to figure out how to get to. These holes were already in the body, so it was important that as I developed the new piece, these holes lined up as close as possible. And same with all of these other ones. The only other two holes that I created new were these guys, but these were existing. The ones in the front on the hood are existing. The ones on the roof are existing, obviously. So now I can sort of create a piece that sort of lands in this zone, and I'll just create a new hole. So that should be easy enough. So we're going to say it needs to be roughly 18 millimeters. 18 millimeters this way. And we're going to say it needs to be pen's not working here. If that's the line of the crossbar, it needs to be roughly 17 millimeters from there. All right, simple as that. I think I can move upstairs. We'll go through the whole 3D modeling process, bring it back downstairs, and we'll print it. All right, so we are up in the office, and for those of you, well, many of you probably aren't familiar with this program. This is Autodesk Revit and Revit 19. This particular view was created when I was doing the early studies for the renderings that I was creating when I was doing the design of the truck. If you haven't seen those renderings, I have them in one of my videos. I'll link it up in the video at some point. And let's move over to, this is kind of just a pretty view. Let's move over to a more utilitarian view. Let's see. So you can see I started to create some of these pieces, the newer 3D modeling pieces in here. Basically what I do is I try to work in the truck file as much as possible so that when I create these new pieces, I can see how they sort of lay out on the skin or on the black panels of the truck. For those of you who are wondering, I created every little thing in here. I even have a nitro engine that I downloaded from OS, and then I added all the gearing and so forth. This is modeled after Metal Concepts. This is modeled after some eBay front control arms. This is all modeled on pieces and parts that I bought as I was building the truck before I even started assembling it in the wood dowel configuration. This was all way before that. I built the entire thing in the computer based on parts that I had already bought, but I didn't actually have a working physical model yet. It was just all done in the computer. Anyway, so let's quickly go through the process. This is going to be more of a demonstration. This is not going to be a tutorial how to create these pieces and parts in Revit. There's probably one other person that's going to watch this video that does Revit, and if that one other person who uses Revit is creating a RC trophy truck, feel free to reach out to me separately, but I don't want to bore everybody else with Revit how-tos. But I will kind of go through my process. If you remember in the first part of the video, we talked about the part being on this panel here. It's going to be 17 millimeters forward of this green crossbar. And then I remeasured it based on having the body kind of in the position I want, and I want to go 20 millimeters off the skin. But the first thing I want to do is I want to give myself sort of a reference plane to work on. So I'm just going to create a new component, which is what Revit calls their little individual families or components. And it's just going to be a generic model. So we're going to select this. And I'm going to do an extrusion just so that I can get a block in the model to work with. And I use it for various working sort of planes, and I'll show you as I go through. Right now it's set to 3 millimeter high. We're going to do 150 millimeter high extrusion. And we'll see how that looks once it's extruded. All right, so we'll spin this guy around, look in the front. It's probably not a bad spot, but we can raise it up. Essentially, I was trying to get it where the body is going to sit. And you can see back here that this was sort of an early version of the rear bracket. If you guys see my mouse, I don't have the cool app that follows my mouse and stuff, so you guys have to bear with me. I'm just recording this on GoToMeeting. this was an earlier version and was really high, and you can see sort of how high the panel was. I've lowered it down significantly since. I think the top of the mounting point is down at the bottom where it's shown here, so it dropped almost a half an inch. So we're just going to kind of hold this new bracket in this zone. Yeah, maybe we'll drop it down a little bit. I'm not quite sure I'm comfortable with that, but really, again, we talked earlier on that it doesn't have to be really precise, since I'm creating a whole new or a brand new hole in the body panel. So I just need to roughly get it where I want it to be. So we can actually use the edge of this box and align it with this crossbar. So I know what the center of that crossbar is. Revit sort of snaps to it, for those of you who don't know. And then the other thing I need to do is I need to create a line. I need to create a couple reference lines. And the reason I do that is so that I can remember where I want to be. 17 millimeters forward, 20 millimeters off. And I'm going to create that reference line on this plane. So I can, if you rotate, you can see that I'm selecting this plane to begin to draw on. So we'll go back to the top view, which the architects and engineers call plan view. We'll create a new reference line, and that reference line is going to be 17 millimeters forward of that edge, or of the center of this crossbar, which is this edge of this block, square, cube, whatever. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to create a 20 millimeter sort of perpendicular to that black panel. Now I know this needs to be 17, so I can actually move this 17 millimeter to that intersection, or to that endpoint, and then I can take both of them. Well, let's see, is that the best way to do it? Because I need to move parallel, so let's not do it that way. I'm going to draw another there, and then I can draw another reference line from here perpendicular to the one that's highlighted. And now I know that, oops, I need to move this line to that intersection. So now I know that the end of this line, which is 20 millimeters off the black panel, is 17 millimeters forward of that green tube. So let's draw, I think what we'll do is we'll draw a little circle here at that intersection. That's the hole that I need to drill in the new bracket, or the hole that I need to create in the new bracket where the body is going to mount up. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing, a little convoluted, but that's just the process on how I create these things. You know, there's a lot of other programs out there like SolidWorks, Blender. I'm sure there's a ton of other things out there, but this is what I know. This is what I use, and I'm pretty efficient in it. So that's just the best way for me to actually get this stuff done. So I think at this point in the video, it's probably best that I do more or less a time lapse illustrating, you know, how I go about creating this piece, but without boring you with all of the, you know, very specific details of how to do this in Revit, since most of you probably aren't going to be using Revit anyway. I'll slow down towards the end, and we can sort of wrap up this portion of, you know, the process, and we can talk about, you know, how it all sort of came together. Cut me some slack. People are listening. Or maybe you're all asleep by now. I don't know. I probably would be. All right, now can I join them? Nope. All right. Doesn't matter. The 3D printing software sort of figures all that out anyways. I don't know. I don't know if I like this. Let's go. Maybe to the bottom. What do you guys think? Like I can actually hear your opinions, but feels better or something like that, right? Yeah. What may need to happen, looking at it again, is that's not high enough to clear this. So I'm going to bring this way down. And then I'm going to redo this so that it intersects that. That probably makes more sense. Now that we have this built, I can export this. I need to clean up some more intersections and whatnot, but I can export this into my 3D printing software, and we can sort of, tweak it from there, put any supports that we need, which I don't think we're going to need supports. This will probably be the bottom when I print it. That's not going to need to be supported, and that's not going to need to be supported. I think it's probably going to be okay the way it is. All right, hopefully that wasn't too painful. I'll probably have done a few time lapses in there because I just kind of, toying to figure it out. But that's the process, and hopefully you learned something or at least found it somewhat interesting. So we've moved over to the Mac. Revit is a PC program, and so in order for me to continue to work in Revit, I've got to use a PC for that, but for everything else, I do Mac. So let's open up. So I actually did do some more refinements. I mean, I was going to bore you guys to tears if I kept, going with what I was sort of doing as I was talking to myself. So here's the revised and updated fender mount. So we'll open this guy up. We need to scale it, and for the sake of not knowing what it was, just for showing you the process, this is where I landed. So this is the program that I use that comes with, or that is part of the Anycubic line. So it's the Photon Workshop. I think that's what it's called. This is the only one that I've ever used, so I can't compare. But basically, I need to bring it the model, the STL file, into this program. And this is where I would create supports. I can mirror it, I can rotate it, I can do a bunch of stuff to it. Normally you would, if you had to create supports for something, you could basically just come in here and define what that support looks like, and then you click on it, and it creates like a little foot with a little arm that helps support it. In this case, we don't need to do that because I'm going to rotate it along the red axes and -90. Basically just like that. This is the build platform, and I really don't think I need any supports. Maybe there would be a support to hold this guy up, but we're talking like a 0.5 millimeter, so I don't think it needs it much. So what I do need to do is duplicate it. I'll grab this guy. We'll put it right there. And that's really it. Not much to show you here, which is good because I'm sure you're bored to tears already. So we'll go to the slicing icon, and I'm going to put it in the slice folder. I know this is all riveting. And we'll slice it, and it's going to tell us approximately how long it's going to take to print this. Now, I don't know that the scale is 100% correct. I think it was roughly around 20 or 30 millimeters tall, but just for demonstration purposes, this is what happens. we'll get a little, 1 hour and 57 minutes. It's probably a little bit big because I don't think it's going to take that long. And you can preview it. And then this shows you how it slices it. So as it goes through the process, all the different slices. Boom, done. All right, let's head back downstairs, back to the workshop area. I've got the 3D printer and the curing machine down there, and I'll sort of describe that process, and we can print this up and see how it turns out. All right, so we are downstairs, right next to the workbench where the truck is, and where I do all of my hobby stuff. I've got my little 3D printer set up here. I think you guys can see this over here. This is the washer and curing little guy, and then this is the Anycubic Photon Mono X. And the reason I went with this one is because it's got a 4K LCD screen. I think that's LCD, right? And it's got a little bit higher resolution, so when printing these parts you don't see a lot of the lines for the layers that it creates. Working with resin has been sort of there has been quite a bit of a learning curve. I think I'm getting better at it now. There's certainly a lot more cleanup after every print. You have to deal with the resin on top of the build plate, the resin that lands all over the place when you try to wipe it off and so forth. But for the most part, it's been very rewarding, and obviously I've been going nuts with that. So we built the new rear fender mount upstairs, plugged it in here, so I think we're ready to go and print. I've been using this Erie One 3D resin. I also have used the H4n stuff, which is substantially more, almost twice as expensive as this stuff, but I found that this stuff is a little bit more flexible and a little bit more forgiving, so I've been sticking with that. I actually have another one coming today. I'm printing in black. I like black because when I spray it like with a silver paint, it really has like a deep, silver luster to it, versus the gray resin. I don't know, it's just too poppy. It's not, it doesn't feel like it's got that deep look to it. Anyway, so I'm sticking with black, and I think black works for, all of this stuff anyways. Let's see, what else? I think that's it for now. We'll go ahead and print. I'm gonna do a time lapse. I think it's like an hour and 20-minute print. I forget what it was, but it's gonna take a while. And then when it's all finished, I'll come back and we'll talk through the process of peeling it off the build plate, sticking it in the washer, and then curing it with the LEDs. So with that, let's put the lid on. Talked about these painter's gloves before. I like them a lot better than the disposable gloves for a couple reasons. One, they're not disposable, so you're not being as wasteful. And two, my hands can breathe in these. The disposable ones, my hands get super sweaty, which is probably way too much information for you guys, but that's the truth of it. All right, cover's off. Very stinky, but so that you guys can hear what I'm saying. Not that you really want to hear what I'm saying, but Turn the exhaust fan off. Alright, so here's the process, and I'm sure there's a lot of different ways of doing this, but you've got to get it all off the top so it doesn't leak all over the place when you pick it up. There's really just no clean way of doing this, I don't think. I think if you don't put so much resin in the reservoir, or whatever we call this black container, maybe it won't get so much on top, but I want to make sure I have enough for what I'm doing. Alright, so this build plate is secured just on the top, and then it slides right off. If you guys can see that, there's our new pieces. Looks pretty good. A successful print. Alright, let me see. So that's what it looks like. It's stuck to the plate. I gotta kind of chisel them off the plate. They give you this really nice sharp spatula with the kit. And there's no graceful way of doing this. In fact, I'm not even sure how I'm going to do it so that you can see it. But there it is. Kind of snap off. So this is a container of IPA, isopropyl alcohol. Propylene alcohol. Basically, it's like 120 proof rubbing alcohol. So put it in there. I usually pull my gloves off after this point. Let me rotate the camera around so you guys can see what I'm doing here. And we'll go over here. That guy comes off. This guy goes on. We'll let this wash. So it's got a little magnetic spinner in there, and it'll help circulate the alcohol. We'll let it wash for 8 minutes, and then we'll come back and check on it. So you may have noticed, may not have noticed, but the magnetic little spinning thing, let that finish, stops every minute and then reverses. So, and if you're wondering why the liquid is kind of a grayish color, it's because I've been doing so much black resin. Ultimately, I need to take the cage out and then put the whole plastic container out in the sun so that the UV rays can turn any of the residual resin that's in here that's been washed off into a solid product. And then I can strain that product out and then have a relatively clean alcohol solution again. So we're going to pull this guy out. Grab our little parts, and I just use compressed air and blow them on. Let's see if I can focus in on this guy. Closer. A little hard to see, but I think you get the general idea. It's a small little piece. So next step is the curing process. Not done yet. Get this guy out of the way. A little rotating table. Change the mode to cure. Throw these guys on there. Come on. We'll let these guys go for another 10 minutes. 8 minutes, I guess, in this case. All right, I think that's more or less it for this process. We'll move back over to the workbench with the truck and we'll get this thing fitted up, see if it works. All right, we are on the home stretch. Actually, to be totally honest, I've already done one of these guys. I mounted it up. I wanted to make sure that I knew the process and how I could sort of efficiently show you this, since this video is probably the longest video I've ever done. So just to kind of go through the process, I marked up that same 17mm spread off of the crossbar that we talked about earlier in the video. It pretty much fit right exactly where we had planned it. The way that I've done this in the past and the way that I did it here, and it was pretty successful, or very successful, is I have the ability to print a little 2D version. I don't know if you guys can see that. Little 2D version of the part and how it's going to go up against the chassis. And what that allows me to do is it allows me to have the perfect hole spacing, so I don't have to sort of guess, since I won't be able to see the holes when I'm putting it up against, and I don't have to measure. I print it, I glue the part to the tape just with a tiny dab of super glue, and then when I get this up against the black plastic panel, I can just stick the tape on the panel, pull the part off the tape, and then I can put the holes right there on the panel. So that's the process. I've done it a few different times on different parts, and we can do that again here. So I'll flip this guy over on the side so that we can kind of see where this thing needs to go. So it's going to go in that zone right there. Just got to make sure it's flat up against the body. So let's see, can you guys see this? I want to make sure it's kind of vertical too. I don't want it to be wonky on the panel. All right, looks pretty good. Let's see if you can see that up in there. Looks pretty vertical. I think there's really no perfect spot for it. The goal, though, I don't know, yeah, you really can't see it here. Let's put it back on the stand. The goal is just to make sure that they're sort of symmetrical. I don't want them to be so far off that it not only does it look weird, but then it throws me off when I'm making a new body or something, or fitting a new body. So they're roughly in the same spot. The goal was to be 17 mil off of this crossbar here. I think that we've got that. So I don't know, do I do the hole first? Mount it first? I think we mount it first. Actually, you know what? I think if we press on it, we can actually get a pretty accurate hole here. So let's put that there. I think we'll be okay. Let's start the process. Oops. I already messed it up. Let's see. Tape didn't hold very well. All right. So we're going to pull the panel off now so that I can get access to the bracket and make sure that that tape sticks to the panel. In between all of the filming that I was doing, I remade these rear fender supports. I wasn't totally happy with where they were, how high the fenders were sitting relative to the truck chassis. You guys see that? So let's press that down real good. It just seemed like it was sort of had a real rake to it. You know, the upper cab panel was a little bit sloped. The fenders were sloped. I dropped it probably by a half inch. It looks a lot better now. Everything's real level and flat with the chassis. I'm actually remaking all of these too, or I'm actually redoing how I'm gonna mount the cab. I don't know if you can see through here, but this one's kind of just stuck up in there. But I'm making individual panels. You see that? That fit up in between the cage to mount the cab. I don't know. I wasn't really feeling. I can't really get back up in there now, but wasn't really feeling how it was how it was mounted with these little guys. I mean, they worked, but you know, I think in the long run this will be better. And I may not even use these two in the back. Right now with those, was that 4, 8? That's 10. It would be 12 mounting points just for the cab. I don't know. I'm just going to plug these holes, maybe just put a little nut on the backside of these little guys and just pretend that they're mounted to something, you know, instead of trying to create a whole nother mount for that. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back to this. So as you can see, I think you can see it pretty good in this camera. It's on there pretty good. So now I just need to make sure that when I peel it off, that stays in the right spot. I've got this little handy Craftsman punch tool. I don't know if you guys can see that. Anyways, I've got the little holes right in the middle of the paper. And I think what I did on the other one and what I've done in the past is I just kind of give it a nice stab, almost going all the way through. I can feel it with my finger on the back side. Another one. And that really helps to nail the alignment of the holes. So let's drill a little pilot hole here. Alright, jump up to the 3mm hole. I don't really need the tape so much anymore. Got holes in the panels already. So that's my process for aligning the holes on something like that. Close off my pen. Do a little deburr action. Oops. This ABS stuff is great. So easy to work with. Talked about it in my other videos, but it really is. Alright, so the one thing that I haven't done yet on this one is I haven't tapped these holes. So let's do that real quick. I've got my 2.5 mil here, and that's for the mounting, or the body mounting screws. So let's slow it down. Are you guys focused on this thing? Oh, there we go. Come on. All right. So these are significantly shorter, and I just sort of hold this, man, it's out of focus, hold this pretty light in my hand, so when this starts to bottom out, I just let go. I don't want to strip all the threads right out of it. Just like that. Alright, that's good to go. Let me get a little compressed air here. Alright, so unfortunately the only way for me to get the nuts on the back is I got to pull this panel off. So bear with me, do a little elevator music for you. Oops, that one dropped. Like I said, this method's worked pretty well for me in the past. The only time it hasn't worked is when I, screw up the hole because I was being too impatient. But I think we're pretty good. We'll start. Yeah, I spoke too soon, huh? A little snug. It doesn't help that the holes that I drilled in the black panel is they're 3 mil, so it's sort of self-tapping into the panel as well. Alright, there she is. Let's get this thing back on here. Wrap this video up. Again, if you've stayed with me this long, I appreciate it. This is going to be a marathon video. I'm assuming you're subscribed by now, and if you're not, please do. You can always hit that bell notification thing so that you guys get notified when my new videos come out. I do have 2 or 3 more that I'm working on. If you watched my last video, you know that I'm getting close to doing paint for the body. And if there's any clue in my other videos, you can see what other colors I've done on different cars. I'm not going to say what color it's going to be, but there's some clues. There's some clues. Actually, I think the color that I plan on doing was front and center in one of my other videos. So if you haven't seen my most recent videos, check it out. All right. There's a couple more that hold it up front, but I think as long as these guys in the back are on, holding everything in place, I think we're good. All right, so let's get this thing sorted. I want to make sure that I'm going to have to take this back off in a second though. I don't want to do the hole just yet in the panel or in the body because it was sort of just loosely hanging there. I'm a little worried that if I get too anxious here, miss it. Oops. That's perfect. All right, let's go with it. Going with the hole. Let's pull this off. with a little pilot hole, and then we'll work our way up. And then I'll go off camera for a second, and I've got the Dremel over by the drill press. I don't like getting the dust all over the camera. All right, that's my pilot hole. Be right back. All right, moment of truth, people. Anybody else have a Verizon box that battery seems to go dead more than it's alive and beeps at you? I know. Riveting conversations with Joseph. Sorry, realizing you guys can't even see what I'm doing here. All I'm trying to do here is get this panel screwed on. Okay, what do you think? See that hole? Shoot. Can you see that hole? What do you think? Close enough? It's pretty good to me. Last one. For those of you with a keen eye, yes, the gap here is massive. This was the first panel I cut very, very early on when I was trying to get the fenders sort of fitted. This gap's much better. This is a massive gap. You know, this first one, bound to be some bigger gaps. Anyway. There it is. I mean, what I'm realizing now is that these little spacers with that little nub on the bottom are meant to fit down in a hole, and I do all of these flat. I used to do them with a hole. I don't know if you guys, let's see if it'll zoom. I used to do it with a big fat hole so that this would actually just sort of fit right down in there like it's supposed to. But I got lazy because I didn't think it was necessary. But now I see, like with something like that, it would help sort of get past the thickness of the body and seat down in there. But I've seen some of these get really nice and tight. Maybe it's because certain parts of the Lexan is thicker than others. But I don't know. I think you get the idea. All right, let's see. Can I show you? Probably not. Can't see it there. There it is. See it? All right, everyone. I think that's probably enough for this video. This is probably a 45-50 minute video if I keep talking. So anyway, thanks again for your time. Hopefully you've got something out of this. If you have any questions, leave it in the comments section below. As always, subscribe if you haven't. Hit that like button if you haven't, and make sure you hit that bell notification for future content. I definitely have a few more videos coming out soon. All right, until the next video, everyone.